Today we're talking about children's ministry. I enjoyed our meeting, and I was asked to share some about what's happening in our children's ministry in Cuba. Our children's ministry in Cuba is a growing ministry. It's getting bigger all the time, and it reminds me of the foundations of our children's ministry and where things started. And I've been asked to share the story. I was I was actually ministering at a church and had a young man. He was about 11, 12 years old, come to me and told me, he said, I've had a dream. Pastor, can I talk to you about my dream? And I said, sure, that's no problem. We can talk about your dream. And he said, Pastor, I had a very strange dream. I had a dream that I had a little bitty guitar, and I was playing that guitar with a stick. Now, this young man had never seen a violin. He'd never held a violin, didn't know what a violin was, but he said, in my dream I had that little guitar, and I was just playing that little guitar with a stick. Do you know what that means? And I said, yeah, I believe I know what that means. And I talked to him, I explained to him what a violin was, and he said, well, can I get one? And I said, yeah, I'll bring you one. And so when I had come back to the United States, I talked to Brother and Sister Kincaid, and we went through the steps, and they had purchased a violin for me to take back to Cuba. Well, I took that violin back to that little boy, and as he opened it up and he began to hold it, he picked it up and he began to play. And I'm not saying he just began to saw. He didn't just begin to run this. He began to play the violin. There was such a natural talent coming out of him with that violin. And he began to learn, he began to grow. And today, because of that little boy and his dream, we have 7 violin players in our churches in Cuba. He has become a violin teacher in Cuba and holds classes, and he has gotten very, very good. But he leads praise and worship in one of our churches with his violin. That all came from a little boy that was dreaming about a guitar with a stick. Another story, we always give Bibles to the children. We make sure that every child has 2 things when they come into the church. They have a meal and they have a Bible. And I was ministering in one of our churches, where most of our churches in Cuba are house churches, and the house had dirt floors and such as that. But we had passed out Bibles, and one little 9-year-old girl gave her a Bible, and she went over and she sat down in the corner. And the whole service I was ministering, and I noticed she never looked up. She never took her eyes off the Bible. The whole time she's going through the Bible and reading and reading and reading and reading and going through her Bible. And then once service was over, the little girl came to me afterwards and had her little Bible in her hand, and she smiled at me and she said, Pastor, I'm ready. I said, what are you ready for? She said, I'm ready to preach. I'm ready. This little girl had never seen a Bible before. It's the first time in her life she'd ever owned a Bible. But she was ready to preach. And I said, well, that's great. And she said, pray for me. So I prayed for the little girl, and she went home. I didn't think anything more about it. The following week, we were opening up service, and I was up front and getting things organized. And this little girl stepped in with the best clothes that she had. Walks into the back of the church, and she's got her little Bible underneath her hand, and she walks up to the pulpit in front, and I'm standing there. She looks up at me and she said, okay, Pastor, I'm ready. And I said, you're ready? She said, yeah, I'm ready to preach today. And I said, well, okay, you preach today. I wasn't expecting anything. I just humoring the little girl. And so she steps behind the pulpit. She closes up my Bible and hands it to me. And it's like, hey, get out of the way, I'm here. And lays her little Bible out, and she begins to preach. The Holy Spirit moved, and there was 15 salvations in that service that day. We had the idea that we have to go to Bible school, we have to do this, we have to do the other. But here's a little 9-year-old girl that's had a Bible for a week and leads 15 people to the Lord. Today, that little girl is pastoring one of our churches in Cuba. Her and her husband are pastoring and doing a great job. God has truly blessed. Don't believe that just because they're a child, they can't accomplish anything. It's those people that God uses that are committed, submitted to Him.